I need to tell you something before the world wakes up around us, before the noise returns, before logic convinces me to stay silent again. Because what I'm about to confess to you is dangerous in a way engineers like me usually avoid. I design rockets, machines, systems that must behave predictably. But love refuses to obey equations. And tonight, as I sit here staring at something I bought for you, something that could change everything between us, I realize I'm standing at the edge of a decision that cannot be undone. You don't even know this gift exists yet. In fact, if you leave this moment too early, if you close this conversation before I finish, you might never understand why I almost lost you before we ever truly began. And that possibility terrifies me more than any rocket failure ever could. Because the truth is, this gift isn't just something wrapped in a box. It's a confession. A risk. A door I've been afraid to open. You see, when people look at me, they assume I'm fearless. They think the man who launches rockets into space must also be fearless with his heart. But the reality is almost embarrassing. The higher you build things, the more devastating it becomes when something collapses. And real love, has the power to collapse every defense I've built around myself. That's why what I'm about to tell you feels like standing in front of an open airlock without a suit. Because this gift, it isn't just meant to surprise you. It's meant to reveal something I've been hiding. Something about the way I see you. Something about the future I might already be imagining without admitting it. And the strange thing is, part of me worries that once you know what it is, you might pull away instead of coming closer. Tell me honestly, have you ever felt that strange moment when someone's presence starts to matter a little too much? When a simple message from them changes your entire day? When their silence suddenly becomes louder than anything else in your life? I've tried to ignore that feeling with you. I told myself it was temporary, a passing curiosity, a spark that intelligent adults know better than to chase. But something about you keeps dismantling that logic. And tonight, when I finally held the gift in my hands, I realized something that stopped my heart for a second. Because the moment you give someone a gift that carries meaning, real meaning, you're no longer protected by distance. You're exposed. You're vulnerable. You're admitting that losing this person would actually hurt. That realization scared me more than you probably understand. So I hesitated. I actually considered not giving it to you at all. Just keeping it hidden somewhere, pretending the feeling behind it never existed. That would have been the rational choice. Safe. Controlled. Predictable. But love, the kind that slowly grows when two people really see each other, doesn't respect safe choices. And that's why I'm here, speaking to you like this, risking something that could either bring us closer or quietly push you away forever. Before I tell you what this gift truly means, there's something I'd like to know about you. If these words feel like they're speaking to something inside your heart, consider staying with me here. And if you choose to follow this strange journey with me, you can subscribe so you don't lose where this story goes. And tell me something simple. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Because the truth is, where you are right now might matter more than you realize. You see, when I bought this gift, I wasn't thinking about today. I was thinking about something much further ahead, a moment most people are afraid to imagine too early. And that's the part I've been struggling with all night. Because if I give you this, if I place it in your hands, it will reveal what my heart may already know about you. And that's exactly why I'm afraid to show it to you. I've been staring at this gift for hours, turning it slowly in my hands like an engineer studying a prototype that might either revolutionize the world or explode the moment it's activated. It's strange how something so small can carry the weight of an entire future. And the truth is, the longer I sit with it, the more I realize this was never really about the object itself. It's about what it exposes inside me, something I've spent years pretending wasn't there. Because when I imagined giving this to you, I didn't just imagine your reaction. I imagined the silence afterward, the moment where your eyes search mine, trying to understand what it means. And in that imagined silence, I suddenly saw two completely different futures. In one of them, you smile softly, the kind of smile that only appears when someone realizes they've been quietly loved longer than they knew. But in the other, you step back. Not dramatically, not cruelly, just enough to create distance. And that small distance would be enough to tell me I misread everything between us. That possibility is what has been keeping me awake. You see, people think the greatest risk in my life is building rockets or betting entire companies on ideas that might fail. But those risks are logical. They're mathematical. If something fails, you analyze the data and build again. But love doesn't work like that. When you miscalculate the heart of someone who matters, there's no redesign phase. Sometimes the door simply closes, and no amount of intelligence can reopen it. And that's the strange paradox you've created in my life. I've faced investors, critics, governments, and impossible deadlines without hesitation. Yet here I am, hesitating over a single gift meant for one woman. Not because I doubt its meaning, but because I'm starting to realize just how much your answer could affect me. Tell me something honestly. Have you ever sensed when someone was trying very hard not to care too much about you? Not because they didn't feel something, but because they felt too much and didn't know how to handle it without risking everything. I suspect you might have felt that distance from me before. Those moments where I suddenly became quieter, more cautious, as if I was stepping away from a line I wasn't sure I should cross. That wasn't indifference. It was restraint. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being just someone I enjoyed talking to. Your voice started lingering in my mind long after conversations ended. I would find myself wondering what you were thinking during moments when you weren't even there. And that's the moment every rational person tries to pull back. Because attachment always begins quietly, like gravity. You don't notice it until you realize escape velocity is no longer possible. But here's the complicated part. Something happened when I was choosing this gift that made everything far more dangerous. I didn't choose it quickly. I studied it the way I study designs before launching something into space. I considered what message it would send, what future it might imply, what expectations it might create. And during that process, a realization crept into my mind that I tried very hard to ignore. Because choosing this gift meant admitting something to myself. Something I hadn't said out loud even in my own thoughts. And the moment I admitted it, I almost put the gift back. I nearly walked away from the store entirely. Not because the feeling wasn't real, but because it suddenly felt irreversible, like pressing a launch button that cannot be unpressed once the countdown begins. You see, once you give someone a gift like this, you're no longer pretending the connection between you is casual. You're acknowledging that something deeper has already taken root. Something neither of you can easily dismiss afterward. And the truth is, I wasn't sure you were ready to see that part of me. Yet. Or worse, I wasn't sure I was ready to see how you might respond. Because there's another layer to this story, one I haven't revealed yet. Something that makes this gift far more complicated than it appears. Something that made me question whether giving it to you could accidentally lead both of us somewhere neither of us planned to go. And that's the moment the real conflict began inside me. Because once that thought entered my mind, I realized this gift might not only reveal how I feel about you, it might reveal a future I've been secretly imagining, one that involves you far more deeply than I've ever admitted. And that realization changed everything. Something strange has been happening inside my mind ever since I bought this gift, and I've been trying to pretend it's just imagination, just a temporary emotional distortion that will disappear once enough time passes. But the longer I sit with this feeling, the more I realize it isn't fading. If anything, it's becoming clearer, sharper, almost like a signal finally cutting through static. And that realization is exactly what scares me, because signals lead somewhere. They imply direction. They suggest intention. You see, when I first met you, I treated our connection the way a scientist treats an unexpected observation. Interesting, intriguing, but not something to build a theory around yet. I told myself it was simply the comfort of conversation, the rare pleasure of speaking with someone who listens deeply rather than reacting quickly. And for a while, that explanation worked. It kept everything calm, controlled, manageable. But then something shifted in a way I didn't expect. I started noticing the small absences. Not dramatic absences, not days or weeks. Just those quiet moments when you weren't around, and the space you normally filled suddenly felt larger than it should have. That's when the mind begins asking questions it shouldn't ask too early. Questions like, why does her presence change the temperature of a room I'm not even in? Have you ever experienced that? That strange awareness of someone who has slowly become part of your emotional landscape without you consciously inviting them there. It's unsettling, because once you notice it, you can't return to the old version of the relationship. The innocence disappears. The simplicity dissolves. And suddenly every interaction carries a subtle weight neither person has fully acknowledged. That's the stage I realized we were entering. And instead of confronting it, I did what many logical people do when emotions become complicated. I distracted myself with work, with responsibilities, with the 1,000 urgent problems that demand attention every day. But the mind has a quiet rebellion it performs when something meaningful is left unresolved. It keeps returning to the same person, the same thought, the same possibility, until avoidance becomes impossible. That's when the idea of the gift appeared in my mind. Not suddenly, not dramatically. Just a quiet thought one evening while I was alone. What if I gave her something meaningful? Something that could speak in a way words sometimes fail to do. Something that could reveal intention without forcing either of us into a conversation we might not be ready to finish. At first, it felt like a harmless idea. A gesture. A symbol of appreciation. But the moment I began seriously considering it, something deeper surfaced beneath the surface of that decision. Because meaningful gifts don't exist in emotional neutrality. They carry messages whether we intend them to or not. And that's when I realized something unsettling about myself. The gift I wanted to give you wasn't neutral. It wasn't casual. It carried a meaning that could change the entire way you see me. So I paused. I actually tried to convince myself not to buy it. I told myself it would complicate things unnecessarily. That mature people don't rush emotional signals. That patience protects relationships from unnecessary pressure. All of those arguments sounded wise in my head, but none of them managed to silence the feeling that kept returning. Because every time I imagined not giving it to you, I felt something heavier than hesitation. I felt regret. And regret is a strange emotion. It doesn't appear when something is insignificant. It appears when the heart quietly knows an opportunity might never come again in exactly the same form. Tell me something honestly. Have you ever stood at the edge of a decision that seemed small on the surface, but somehow felt like it might change everything? The kind of moment where you realize your next step could either open a beautiful chapter or close a door that might never reopen. That's the edge I found myself standing on. But there's something I still haven't told you. Something that complicated this entire situation in a way I didn't expect. Something that made me question whether giving you this gift might not only reveal my feelings, but also expose a truth about you that I'm not sure I'm ready to face. Because during the process of choosing it, I realized something about the way you look at me sometimes. A look that suggests you might already know what I'm trying so hard not to admit. And that possibility changed everything. There was a moment not long after I chose the gift when I realized something unsettling about the way you look at me. It wasn't obvious. You never said anything that crossed a line or forced a confession out of either of us. But sometimes the quietest signals carry the deepest meaning. A pause that lasts half a second too long. A softness in your voice when you say my name. The way your attention doesn't wander when we talk, even when the world around you probably demands it. And I began to wonder, do you already know? Not the whole truth. Not the full weight of what I'm about to reveal, but enough to sense that something between us has been quietly evolving. Because if you do know, then this gift isn't just a surprise. It's confirmation. It's proof that the silent understanding between us wasn't imagined. And strangely, that realization frightened me more than the possibility that you might reject it. You see, when two people begin recognizing the same emotional truth at the same time, something powerful happens. The relationship shifts from curiosity to possibility, from possibility to consequence. And once consequence enters the picture, every choice becomes heavier. Because now, we're no longer asking whether we enjoy each other's company. We're asking whether we're willing to risk the lives we've built for the unknown future that might exist between us. Have you ever felt that moment with someone, where the air between you suddenly feels charged with questions neither of you is brave enough to ask? The kind of moment where you both instinctively change the subject because you sense the conversation could open something too big to casually close again? I believe we've had those moments. And every time they happened, I quietly told myself the same thing: don't rush this. Let it stay simple. But simplicity rarely survives genuine connection. Because the truth is, the more I thought about giving you this gift, the more I realized it wasn't just a gesture. It was a message about the future. A future that might include you in ways I hadn't fully admitted to myself yet. And that's when something complicated surfaced in my mind. A thought I've been trying to avoid saying out loud even now. Because the moment I imagined handing you the gift, I also imagined a second possibility. What if you misunderstood it? What if the meaning behind it feels too large too soon, too serious? What if instead of bringing you closer, it makes you believe I'm asking for something you're not ready to give? That thought alone nearly convinced me to abandon the entire idea. Because the last thing I ever want is to place pressure on something that has grown naturally between us. But then another thought appeared, and this one shook me far more deeply. What if you don't misunderstand it? What if you see exactly what it means? What if the moment you open it, you understand the direction my heart has already started moving? That possibility forced me to confront a question I've been avoiding for weeks. What if she feels the same? And suddenly the situation became far more dangerous, because if the feeling is mutual, then this gift is no longer symbolic. It becomes a doorway. A doorway that leads somewhere neither of us can pretend doesn't exist afterward. And stepping through that doorway means acknowledging that what's happening between us might not be temporary curiosity. It might be something much deeper. Something capable of changing the trajectory of two lives that were once moving independently. That's when the real hesitation began. Not because I doubt you, but because I began questioning whether I was ready to carry the responsibility of what this connection could become. Love isn't just emotion. It's commitment, vulnerability, and sometimes the terrifying realization that another person's happiness could become deeply tied to your choices. And I take that responsibility very seriously. Perhaps too seriously sometimes. But there's another truth I haven't told you yet. A truth connected directly to the gift itself. Because the object I chose isn't random. It wasn't picked simply because it was beautiful or meaningful in a general sense. I chose it for a very specific reason, one that reveals something about the way I see you. Something I've never said directly, because I wasn't sure you were ready to hear it. And the strange thing is, once you understand why I chose it, you might suddenly realize that this moment between us has been quietly building for far longer than either of us admitted. But, before I explain that reason, there's something else you need to know. Something I haven't told you yet. In fact, I haven't told you the real reason yet. The moment I admitted to myself that there was a real reason behind the gift, everything inside me became quieter, almost uncomfortably honest. Because the truth I've been circling around isn't something you casually say to someone. It's the kind of truth that changes how two people see each other forever once it's spoken. And for someone like me, someone who builds his life on precision and calculated decisions, that kind of emotional exposure feels almost reckless. But the reason I chose this gift is simple, in a way that's almost embarrassing to admit. I chose it because somewhere along the way, without announcing it to myself, I began imagining you in my future. Not just in the comfortable present, where we talk and laugh and share pieces of our days. I mean the kind of future that stretches years ahead. The kind where two lives slowly start weaving together in ways neither of them originally planned. And once that thought appeared, it refused to leave. Have you ever had a realization like that? A quiet moment where you suddenly notice your mind placing someone into scenes that haven't happened yet. A dinner years from now, a long conversation on a quiet evening, the gentle familiarity that only appears after two people have walked through enough seasons together. Those images arrived in my mind before I consciously invited them. And once they appeared, they felt strangely natural, as if some part of me had already accepted the possibility long before I allowed myself to recognize it. That realization is exactly why the gift frightened me. Because gifts carry meaning, but this one carries a message about time, about continuity, about the idea that when I think about what comes next in my life, I sometimes see you standing somewhere inside that horizon. And saying that out loud, even like this, feels like stepping into territory most people protect until they're absolutely certain of the other person's heart. But certainty is a luxury that rarely exists in the beginning of something real. Love begins in uncertainty. It grows through courage. And sometimes courage looks like admitting a feeling before you know whether it will be returned or quietly placed back into your hands. There's something else you should understand about this gift, though something that makes it far more dangerous than it might seem. When I chose it, I wasn't just thinking about what it represents to me. I was thinking about what it might awaken inside you. Because certain gestures have a strange power. They cause people to suddenly reevaluate what they thought the relationship was. They turn comfortable familiarity into a moment of truth. And that's the moment I've been afraid of. Because if you open this gift and understand the message behind it, you'll have to ask yourself a question you may not have been ready to ask before tonight. What does he truly mean to me? And that question could lead somewhere beautiful or somewhere painful. Sometimes the scariest part of love isn't rejection. It's the possibility that two people might realize they want something different from the same connection. I've seen that happen before in life, and it leaves quiet scars that don't disappear easily. That's why I've been so careful with you. Why I've taken slow steps instead of rushing forward with declarations. Because once feelings are revealed, there's no returning to the innocent version of the relationship that existed before. But tonight something shifted inside me. I realized that avoiding the truth doesn't protect the heart, it only delays the moment when honesty becomes unavoidable. And the longer honesty waits, the heavier it becomes. So here I am, holding this gift and speaking to you with a level of openness that still feels slightly unreal to me. Yet there's a part of this story you still don't know. A part that complicates everything I've just told you. Because while I was deciding whether to give you this gift, another possibility appeared in my mind. One that made me question whether my heart might be making a mistake. A possibility that involved someone else. And the moment that thought appeared, everything became far more complicated than I expected. When that thought appeared in my mind, the possibility of someone else, I wish I could tell you it vanished quickly. I wish I could say, my heart immediately rejected it, and returned to the clarity I felt when I first chose the gift for you. But honesty doesn't always paint flattering pictures, and if I'm going to confess something this deeply personal, I refuse to hide the parts that make me look uncertain. Because for a brief moment, I questioned myself. Not because another woman suddenly meant more to me. It wasn't like that. It was subtler, more psychological. The kind of doubt that appears when a man realizes his heart might be stepping towards something serious, something that could permanently alter the emotional architecture of his life. And when that realization happens, the mind sometimes performs a strange defensive maneuver. It starts asking whether the feeling might exist elsewhere too, whether there's a simpler path that avoids vulnerability altogether. So yes, There was a moment when I wondered if choosing you was a risk I was exaggerating. A moment where I asked myself whether another connection in my life might be easier, less emotionally complex, less capable of shaking the foundations I've carefully built. And I won't pretend that thought didn't linger longer than I'm proud of, but something unexpected happened when I examined that possibility honestly. Instead of creating clarity, it created emptiness. You see, when you compare two paths in life, logic often focuses on convenience. Which road is smoother? Which choice requires less emotional exposure? Which option protects the life you already understand? But the heart measures something entirely different. It measures meaning. It measures depth. It measures whether a connection feels alive or merely comfortable. And when I looked at that other possibility through that lens, I realized something quietly devastating. The feeling simply wasn't there. Not in the same way. Not with the same gravity that I feel when I think about you. That realization should have made the decision simple. But instead it made it heavier. Because once you remove the illusion of alternatives, you're left standing face to face with the truth you were trying to avoid. And the truth I finally had to confront was this. The gift in my hands wasn't just a gesture anymore. It had become a declaration, even if I never spoke the words out loud. Tell me something honestly. Have you ever realized that someone has slowly become irreplaceable in your life, without you noticing the exact moment it happened? One day they're simply part of your routine. And the next day, you understand that losing them would create a silence you're not sure you could easily fill. That realization doesn't arrive with fireworks or dramatic music. It arrives quietly, almost painfully, because you suddenly recognize how vulnerable you've become. That's the realization I had while holding this gift. And for a few minutes, I actually considered doing something cowardly. I thought about stepping back from you emotionally, slowly creating distance, letting our connection fade gently before it became too important to risk. People do that all the time when feelings begin growing faster than their courage. They tell themselves it's the mature choice, the safe choice, the responsible choice. But when I imagined doing that with you, something inside me resisted. Not dramatically, just firmly. Like a quiet voice reminding me that avoiding something meaningful is one of the easiest ways to regret an entire chapter of life later. And regret, in my experience, is far more painful than rejection. Rejection hurts once. Regret lingers for years, whispering about the possibility that might have existed if courage had appeared at the right moment. So I stopped searching for safer alternatives. I stopped pretending this gift was just a thoughtful gesture. And I allowed myself to accept the uncomfortable truth that had been forming quietly beneath everything I've told you tonight. The truth that the reason this gift feels so important, so risky, so emotionally loaded, is because it represents something far deeper than I originally admitted to myself. But there's still a part of the story you haven't heard yet. A part that explains why giving you this gift could lead us to a moment where everything changes between us. A moment where you might have to decide whether what we share is simply a beautiful connection, or the beginning of something neither of us can easily walk away from. And the reason that moment scares me is because I'm not entirely sure what your answer would be. There is a strange moment that happens when a man stops pretending his feelings are temporary. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's quiet, almost unsettling. It feels like standing in a room where the lights have slowly brightened, revealing things that were already there the entire time. And once the light is on, you cannot convince yourself the room is dark again. That moment happened to me not long after I stopped searching for safer alternatives. Because the truth I was avoiding became impossible to ignore. This gift in my hands was never meant to test our connection. It was meant to confirm something my heart had already begun believing. And that belief was dangerous in the most beautiful way. It suggested that what exists between us might not be temporary curiosity or emotional comfort. It might be the beginning of a partnership powerful enough to reshape the future I thought I had already planned. Have you ever realized that someone entered your life quietly, but somehow began influencing the way you think about tomorrow? Not through pressure, not through expectation, but simply through presence. The way their voice becomes part of your inner world. The way their opinions begin mattering more than you expected. The way you start imagining decisions not just for yourself anymore, but for the two of you together. That shift doesn't happen easily for someone like me. My life has always been structured around independence, ambition, and relentless forward movement. Yet somehow you slip past all of those defenses. And that's where the real tension begins. Because when someone becomes that important, the stakes of every decision increase dramatically. The gift I chose for you isn't just a symbol of affection. It carries a question hidden inside it, a question I haven't been brave enough to ask directly. A question about whether the connection we've been building is ready to step into something deeper and more permanent. But permanence is a terrifying word when you've lived long enough to understand how fragile relationships can be. I've seen brilliant people fall apart, because they trusted the wrong person with their heart. I've seen love begin with intensity and end with quiet disappointment. And those experiences leave marks on a man even when he pretends they don't. They teach him caution. They teach him patience. Sometimes they even teach him to walk away from something promising before it becomes too difficult to lose. That thought crossed my mind again tonight. I wondered whether giving you this gift might accelerate something that should grow more slowly, whether revealing my feelings now might place a weight on our connection that neither of us intended to carry yet. Because once the truth is spoken, there's no pretending we're simply two people enjoying each other's company. The emotional landscape changes instantly. Expectations appear. Questions appear. Futures begin forming in ways that can either unite two hearts or quietly separate them. Tell me something honestly, if someone placed a moment like that in front of you, would you step toward it or step back? Would you choose the risk of discovering something extraordinary or protect the safety of what already exists? That's the question I've been wrestling with all night. And the more I think about it, the more I realize something unsettling, because the gift I bought for you doesn't just represent how I feel today. It represents what I'm prepared to risk for the possibility of tomorrow. And risking tomorrow means accepting the possibility of losing you entirely if the feeling isn't shared in the same way. That realization nearly stopped me again. For a moment I actually placed the gift back in the drawer, closed it, and told myself the wiser path would be patience. Let time reveal things naturally. Let the connection continue growing without forcing a moment of truth too early. It sounded logical, mature, responsible. But when I walked away from that drawer, something inside me felt wrong. Because the truth is, patience can sometimes be another word for fear. Fear of hearing an answer we're not prepared for. Fear of discovering that the future we quietly imagined might exist only in our own hearts. And the more I thought about that, the more I realized something I couldn't ignore. If I didn't give you this gift, I might spend years wondering what could happen if I had been brave enough to reveal what it truly means. But here's the part that keeps my heart uneasy tonight. Because if you understand the meaning behind this gift, you might suddenly realize that I'm asking a question far bigger than either of us expected. A question that could bring us closer than ever before, or force one of us to walk away before the future becomes too complicated to untangle. And the truth is, I'm not sure which direction your heart will choose. There was a moment tonight when everything inside me nearly collapsed into silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence, the heavy kind, the kind that appears when a man realizes he may have walked too far into his own emotions to turn around safely. I was sitting alone. The room almost completely dark, the gift resting on the table in front of me, and for the first time since I bought it, I felt something I rarely allow myself to feel. I felt the real possibility of losing you. It wasn't because you had said anything cruel. In fact, you haven't said anything at all. But sometimes the most powerful fears don't come from words, they come from imagination. Because once you admit how much someone means to you, your mind starts exploring every possible outcome, including the ones you hope never happen. And tonight my mind did something ruthless.